busy and full day working on this bike. Shortly after the last video that I was working on, I had a little problem, and that as I was working with the forks to put them on, was in the process of moving them up into place, I shook the bike some, and it actually rocked back and partially came down off the stand that I had it on. So as you can see here, I've beefed up a little bit. I basically came in here with a couple of support poles that I had in the basement, and which was pretty quick and easy to set that up. And up high, what you can't see, I've got a steel beam sitting across some of the supports, and basically ratcheted this up and held this up with a jack, come along jack, and some heavy strapping. So got this supported where it can't go anywhere. It scared me to death before, and that was a learning point. Should have had that thing more secure. But the thing I want to tell you that I have done since last video is these forks I have taken and I brought them and filled them up with oil, and then went ahead and put them in place here on the bike. And then once I put them in place and clamped down, I came and I replaced the caps on top. So I was able to take the cap, kind of compress that down and get it in after it was clamped back in the bike. This feels really good. I think this is going to be very smooth. This looks like everything is lined up nice. Everything appears to be straight, and I am anxious to see how this all comes together and works. So I think we're going to be in pretty good shape. So next step here, oh, by the way, one thing I didn't tell you on filling this up with oil, which probably would have been interesting for you to see. The way you do that is with this cap off, with the spring out, the sleeve that sits above it, and the washer. There's three parts that sit on top of this: spring, washer, and sleeve. All those three components out, and then with this upper part of the fork compressed all the way down, you put in, I think it was 224 cubic centimeters or milliliters of oil, which I think is roughly about 15, a little less than 16 ounces. That's what the manual calls for. But the way you know when you're done is you want the oil with spring out, all the parts of the spring out, washer out, sleeve out, compressed all the way down. You fill this fork up with oil such that it's 111 millimeters from the top of the fork in its compressed state, so it's down here, to the top of the oil. And of course you measure that with it sitting up vertical, not angled like this, but this is the depth from the top that it was. So I used calipers to measure that, and that worked fine. And so I think I am getting really close. I could put this back together right now. I've got to decide whether I'm going to replace the wheel bearing or not. I think the wheel bearings are actually pretty good in this, but they did take some kind of a shock, so I'm debating going on and replacing them. I have the bearings, and so I'm going to think through that next and decide what I want to do. The other thing you didn't see is that I did get this reassembled and moved I guess I did film that. Put the handlebars in place. I have gone and rerouted, looked back through the photos that I had taken of this earlier, where the cables go, and have attempted to get everything rerouted the way it's supposed to be. Back through the clamps as it was, and it's always a good thing is to make sure you note that when you're taking something apart. Here it is. It is the morning of December 30th, I think. Yeah, December 30th, day before New Year's Eve, 2016. So last night I ended up having to quit making video while I was working on the bike. My battery died, my memory got full, and so I went on and did a few things. But here's where the bike sits right now. You can also see I moved the poles that I had put in place as lift mechanism. I don't need them now. So those are out of the way. And the bike is now sitting at a state where I've got the forks and the front wheel on.
and really ready to finish up. The forks look good. I think everything's going to be okay there, and I'll come back in a second and talk a little more about that. But the thing that I would want to point out here is that I did not end up putting the bearings in the wheel last night. And looking at that, it's probably pretty simple and straightforward, but I was a little bit reluctant to dive into that without a little more time. And I checked the bearings that are in it, and it looks fine. I put them on the forks and spun the wheel and felt everything. It feels tight. Bearings spin free. Does not appear to be any damage to those. I'll ride it a little bit. I may come back and change those at a later time. But the net of it is to put it back together. You basically reverse the process that it came apart, and so what that required to do was to get the wheel here in place. There's a little bushing here you have to make sure is in the wheel when it goes in, to spacer, to make sure it's in the right spot. Then the shaft gets just pushed through this side, and then as you're doing that, the mechanism for the speedometer, there's a mechanism as well as a spacer and a bearing right here that operates the speedometer. You have to get that in place as kind of a spacer and for the speedometer in this position. So that has to go in to the side of the wheel, and then just you press the shaft on through the hub through this assembly, and then once it reaches the threads in this fork, you can screw that in with the large Allen head wrench. Then once you have that in place, you come back to this fork, tighten down these clamp screws so that the axle can't come out, and then come back to the front calipers. And inside the calipers, just like on a car, you have to compress the cylinders a little bit to make clearance to go over the rotor, and then you just slide this mechanism onto the rotor, and then there are two. You basically make sure there's a brake pad on either side of the rotor, slide it on, and then screw these two bolts back in, and that's all there is to it. And so that's actually quite easy to put together. This is going to have to come off again. I don't have the fender on it. You can see there's the fender over there. Other thing I would point out at this point is I've mounted the speedometer back on last night and the headlight. You can, if you recall, these were both bent and banged up pretty bad from whatever happened to this thing, and so those are now on there. Okay, to talk just a little further, following up on what I was saying. So last night, like I said, I did put the wheel back on and had run out of battery power, and had to clear up some memory on the camera. And so I just went on and worked on it. It seems like I'm spending as much time trying to record this as I am doing the work. But anyway, I think people may find this interesting. If somebody else wants to do it, I thought it would at least be worth putting up the how-to on it. So I put the forks on, and they basically slid back up into these brackets. Then this cap on top. And I explained last night how I filled this with oil, then put the cap on once I had it clamped in place. This makes a nice holder. Do the same on this side. And at that point, the bike forks were essentially on place. Now, when I put the forks on, I had to, of course, thread these signal lights on as the forks went on. And then after I did that, I came back and I mounted the speedometer and the headlight. These are the ones, if you recall, that from the initial accident were all bent up. I had put these things on my vise bench top, took a little hammer and an anvil and did a little work and smoothed out the metal where I really don't think you notice on either one of these that they were in a wreck, with the exception of one small dent on the top of the speedometer. But I think I'm going to leave it because it's the original, it's not been tampered with, and it's got 6600. The other thing I wanted to point out here is, if you remember, a lot of what the repair work was in fixing the stop down underneath the stem so that the forks would turn. These do have a nice solid stop point to them. You can feel it, nice hard bump, and so that's good. We'll check that out with the gas tank here in a minute, and actually I've already done that, and so I know that there's good clearance. But
What I need to do next is get the gas tank back on, get the seat on, and then the remaining thing to fix is this bent brake pedal. And at that point, I think this bike will be rideable. So let's go to the next step.